Hello, everyone. And today I have a great pleasure to talk to Ryan Hurd. He is a dream educator, teacher, and explorer of consciousness. And today, what I would like to talk with him about is what is happening to us at night when we experience different unpleasant, scary moments, that some of them can be called nightmares or night terrors or sleep paralysis. But in general, I would like to talk with him about these different kind of dreams or states of consciousness or experiences that we have during the night that maybe not often enough we talk about it, and they can be highlighted by complicated circumstances, by trauma, by a lot of things. So this is going to be our subject today. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being here today. Welcome. Would you like to start by saying a little bit about yourself, about what brought you into the world of dreams, sleep?
Sure. So I had, like many children, nightmares growing up, right? And but this became more complicated for me when I had my first sleep paralysis type nightmare, which is a very realistic feeling of that is almost like the nightmare in waking life. It's sort of a blend of dream and waking life, and where I felt that I was being held down by a demonic force. I was maybe 13 or 14 at the time, and it felt very realistic. And that was an experience that was very terrifying. And of course, it was short lived. These experiences often are short, and it diminished, and I was freed. But what made it, I would say, impactful was that I quickly learned that I wasn't supposed to talk about it, right? Like, so I wasn't definitely not given props for talking about, hey, I had this really terrifying experience. It was kind of like a demon, but I was awake. And so what happened is very quickly people's worldviews sort of focused in and were like, well, it was a dream. It wasn't real. It didn't really impact you. Or folks who maybe had religious perspectives were like, oh, kind of tight-lipped. And so as a child, I found this confusing, and I saw how there's just such a taboo against the night, against the dark side of dreaming in the night, and our experiences there, which are wholly natural and a part of human experience. And so richly we're rewarded when we do have the space and the comfort to be able to look at them with some distance and some clarity. So that was really the impact. It wasn't so much that the sleep paralysis nightmare in itself, yeah, it was scary, and it was an existential moment of, oh, so life's a little weirder than I thought it was. And maybe that wasn't just a metaphor, talking about spirits and things like that. So this is my 14-year-old adolescent brain going, but rather the way that people wouldn't engage with it. And I found that to be probably one of the hardest things about being a nightmare sufferer in today's world.
Yeah, you touched on so many important points here, like saying that it's maybe something that we are not really encouraged to talk about, or we are afraid of being judged even to talk about it. And the perspective that I think nowadays there's more information and studies around about those experiences, but as you said, in the past it was or diminishing, like it was just a dream, or maybe you are just possessed by a demon. Both options like don't really give you any room for exploration and understanding what is really happening to you. And you also said that you understood that it was actually normal, that it's a normal part of human experience, that it can happen to you. And I feel it's very important to highlight this, because it's like any other uncomfortable thing in our life. We as humans, we are motivated by pleasure. We don't really like to experience discomfort or pain or fear, but they are part of our experience. They are part of us being human. And with nightmares, I feel that it's just our body, our mind, our being is processing, something is happening there. And then we have those experiences, and they are normal considering what is going on with us. And again, just kind of trying to keep it for ourselves, it's very detrimental, because how did you manage to, from this place when you felt like kind of there's not maybe much help from out there, and you kind of felt like you need to try to discover, explore it by yourself so you can help yourself?
You know, it was like that. I was lucky to have an adult friend, you know, from part of my youth group who came to talk about dream journaling. I think this was the year after I had that nightmare. And I was so excited to see any adult at all to express an interest in dreams. And I started my first dream journal when I was 15 because of her influence. Yeah, and it was just, yeah, this insight of, oh, what this is a imaginal world that I can't express, but it influences me, how I feel, how I think, how I see the world, and we don't talk about it. And then to be given that opening felt like a tremendous burst of creative energy and empowerment. And that's what often happens when folks begin to focus on dreams. Is at first there's this exhilaration effect, often because we're motivated by pleasure, as you say, and are looking for experiences perhaps that we can not normally experience in waking life. But then, of course, what happens is that the shadows grow longer. The longer we look at our dreams, and we realize, oh, like there's a lot of, you know, dark material here, you know, existential material, a lot of fears. And I love that when we don't turn away from that, it's just the dreams do yet another revolution where the things that were scary and hard to look at become yet another source of inspiration and creativity and fruitfulness. Because the nightmare is a loud dream trying to get our attention. I don't really think dreams are messages so much as they're expressions of the body mind, but they come through so loudly that we're forced to listen to them, and we're rewarded when we do so, right?
Yes, that's right. I really agree with what you said, that dreams, the nightmares are our loud dreams, because I find it that if we don't look into our dreams and we don't deal with things that need attention, that our dreams are trying to show us, they transform into nightmares many times, and it's like a loud dream. I really like this. I really like this definition of nightmare. I forgot to mention at the beginning when I was introducing you that you are also an author of several books, and you contributed to many publications in the dreams and consciousness area. And one of your books is about sleep paralysis. Could you maybe start with explaining a little bit what's the difference between regular nightmare and night terror and sleep paralysis? I think there are like several different things that happen that many times are being put under one umbrella, and they are not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, it's really confusing. And, you know, researchers throughout the last 100 years were really confused by this too. And often when I look at, for instance, things that were written in the 1930s and 40s, people are conflating, say, sleep paralysis nightmares with idiopathic nightmares. And so an idiopathic nightmare is essentially the normal, you know, nightmare, garden variety nightmare of a disturbing dream, an emotionally disturbing dream. And the old definition is that they lead to awakening. And so it disturbs the sleep. Now, interestingly, that criterion for wakefulness is being questioned now. It's like, well, if it's a impactful bad dream, then we could call that a nightmare, especially if it's a repetitive bad dream. Some researchers are saying, yeah, that's a nightmare. So anyhow, these are, you know, a sleep phenomena. They occur in dreaming sleep, generally in REM sleep, but not always. But that narrative, they have a story. We're, you know, embodied as a dream figure, right? So that's the idiopathic nightmare. Sleep paralysis is a combination of some of that dreaming mentation, but it's occurring while we're aware of our sleeping body. And so it feels like it's a hybrid state of awareness in such that, when we're dreaming, when we're asleep, our muscles are essentially in a lockdown, in a state of motor paralysis. And so this is mostly our big skeletal muscles, the long muscles, but that includes the ones in the diaphragm, right?
Mm-hmm.
As well as like our arms and legs and whatnot. And so when we're dreaming, ordinarily, we're experiencing this paralysis, but we don't notice it because we're in a dream. What happens in sleep paralysis, awareness of sleep paralysis, is you can wake up and then try to move, to roll out of bed, and realize you can't move. In fact, you feel stuck. And then that is that motor paralysis. We're noticing it. People become fearful of this. They try to take in a gasp of air, and then they feel a pressure on the chest because the diaphragm is not really doing what it does 100% of the time. And so it can feel like constriction on the chest and in the throat. We're in a dream state, but we're aware of our muscle paralysis. And what happens is essentially all those dreaming mentation, everything that's true about dreams, that they're really emotional, they're really symbolic, we're more visual. All of that happens while we're in this vision state. And so it's interesting. Different things happen to different people, but one of the biggest ones is the sense of presence, the sense of someone or something else is in the room and is responsible for my condition. And so I'm feeling like there's a pressure on my chest, and I interpret it as something is holding me down. And it's more than an interpretation. It's like cognitively, we can feel that there's another person in the room. And so there's something happening with consciousness, with how sort of a splitting of awareness is occurring with subject and object. It's really terrifying because it feels like we're awake and aware. We're very sort of lucid in that sense. And then we're having this, and so it's not going away. Like, this can't be happening, and yet it still is happening. And so that's where these sort of that real, I'd say almost death anxiety can come out of these experiences when they get very traumatic. And then there's also the hallucinations that occur. So the visual, dream imagery. And it tends to be blended into these feelings of there's another person in the room. And so we see or feel or experience in some other kind of way, an other, an entity, right? A figure. And often this figure is shrouded in not visually clear. And so it can be very amorphous. And by the way, like all around the world in different cultures, everyone's got sort of these their own cultural variation of this sort of shadowy monster, and they call them by different names. Definitely something that happens that's biological, and it's emerging from the human experience. And then we kind of cloak it with cultural folklore. And so this is where some alien abduction experiences are happening in sleep paralysis, experiences of ghosts, experiences of vampires and zombies. The old hag is one of the ways that it was first described by David Hufford, who is a medical anthropologist who really began to really look into this phenomena and separate it from the nightmare as something unique, as something that's profoundly unique from the nightmare, because it happens right in the state of somatic victimhood, right? One of the great research of this is Jorge Canizas Sevilla, who is a lucid dreaming researcher and also a sleep paralysis experiencer. And he liked to term it bound lucidity, as it's a kind of a lucid dream, but we're bound.
Yeah,
And
this
so,
is this is what I wanted to ask you about, because it's like, so we are asleep, right? So we're having this dream image and hallucinations, but we are asleep, just we are aware of our body. But my question was, so how is this different from regular lucid dreams when we are just aware that we are dreaming, but then we don't have this body awareness? Like, how is that different?
Well, in some ways, so the lucidity being I'm aware that I'm in a dream state, right? That's the central definition of what lucid dreaming is.
Right.
That's the way that it should be defined. Some sleep paralysis experiencers do not have that level of lucidity. it feels like I'm awake and aware, and then a demon is on me, or a witch is riding me, or a ghost is molesting me, right? And so these are all narratives of that experience, express what's happening. And so, but you can have formal lucidity in the sleep paralysis experience, and that's really where the power is. Just like with nightmares in general. Oh, this is sleep paralysis. I'm experiencing as a biological phenomena. I'm actually safe right now. I can wake myself up. And there's ways to wake yourself up, and we can talk about that. And so that's what lucidity brings to the experience, is that profound ability to take back some power.
Yeah, very interesting. So it's like different, like, because in our lucid dreams, when we are lucid, we can be lucid on many levels, right? If you ever experience lucid dreaming, so it's not always this full lucidity, right? It's not always like, oh, this is a dream and I can, take control of it, or whatever you want to do. But many times I experienced myself, it's different levels of lucidity. Like, I am kind of aware, for example, that I am dreaming, that it's a dream, but at the same time, I'm not aware that this is creation of my mind, right? So I know it's a dream, but I still react as if I didn't know, for example. So it's like this different kinds of lucidity. So here it happens that maybe like you are aware, but you are not fully aware. But that's why this information is so important, because if this is happening to someone right now and they experience this, if they have this information, that they can bring this awareness to say, I just heard this, that someone said that my brain is working and this is just physiological things happening to my body, and I'm dreaming this demon. It's not really a demon standing in front of me, even though it feels so real. So as you said, there are ways to take action. This is the empowerment, right?
Right, exactly. And what's so interesting so we've got nightmares and we've got sleep paralysis. And so as you see, they're different phenomena. But the third one we haven't discussed yet is the sleep terror,
Right.
which used to be called the night terror, but they can happen really anytime during the 24-hour cycle. So a sleep terror is a completely different kind of disorder. In fact, it's more called an arousal disorder rather than a sleep symptom. And what happens is that we're waking up out of slow wave deep sleep.
Okay.
And it's very disorienting. And there is very little lucidity of the person who's having this experience. They're having something scary is happening to them. They're emerging out of this deep sleep, and they're thrashing about, and they often can seem like they're having a seizure. Sometimes it can seem that way. There could be repetitive movements, as well as just attempts to talk but not being very able to like express, and even not even understanding that you're next to them, saying, hey, can you hear me? Wake up. They're not responsive, even though their eyes may be open. And it is again, this is something that's natural. It happens to humans. It happens for different reasons, usually related to stress or disruption of sleep, and all the things that can disrupt sleep, right? All those things. And then people wake up out of it. And the thing that you can really notice about it afterwards is that the dreamer usually doesn't remember what happened. And so you say, what was that about? And the dreamer's like, the first thing I remember is you saying, can you hear me? And that was just like 5 seconds ago. And there might be a vague sense of something there, but the content itself is really hard to get to. And so that's a sleep terror. And they're particularly hard, I think, for adults to manage when their children have them, because you can, as a parent, one can feel very just powerless, and there's sort of all you can do is sort of hold them and wait for them to come to. But if another adult in your space is having a night terror or sleep terror, it's best to not interfere bodily at all, and to use words to bring them back, but don't try to hold them down, because you could get clocked, and they can sort of fight back and still be in this state of of chaos. So they're hard to watch, but they tend to happen for children. They happen between the ages of like 4 and about 7, and then they diminish naturally over time, and they come back for adults sometimes, for some people, um, in an idiopathic way because of stress. Or I remember once I had a night terror as an adult, and it was because I helped my friend move his house, and he wanted to start. It was like 11 p.m. when we started moving like furniture. So we were done at like 4 a.m, and I had a huge cup of coffee before we started moving. So I was like, okay, I need to be kind of jacked up for this. And I went to sleep at like 5 a.m. and I went straight into a night terror because my sleep was so confused about like, whoa, like, what time is it? My circadian rhythm was really super confused. And I actually brought a little bit of content from that back. I had brought back the content of being surrounded by rats and vermin, and
Wow.
kind of and I emerged out of this sort of horror of just too many rats, essentially.
Yeah. Wow, that's really scary. And but as you said, it's important to know that those are different phenomena, because also from what I heard is that during, as you said, during night terrors, your body can also be active. Like you can be acting out things. You can be, I don't know, moving your limbs, and this usually doesn't happen during just a regular nightmare, right? And the inability to remember, like many times people have no recollection of someone say, you just, I think you had a nightmare last night, and then they say, I don't remember anything. And this can point to the fact that maybe someone was not actually experiencing a nightmare, but they had a night terror, right? So from here, maybe I would like to ask you about what can we do when we are experiencing those states? Like, what's your experience from the research you did, from the work you did? What can we do when we experience a sleep paralysis? And is there even anything to do when we experience sleep terrors? If you could
Yeah,
share.
I mean, so at one level, all of these experiences can be considered as sort of red flags for my mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health, right? So for my holistic sense of safety and well-being in the world, something is emerging that needs attention, and we can use these as flags, as the canary in the coal mine. And so often people who are anxious don't need a reminder that they're anxious. People who are traumatized already know that they're traumatized, and so there's more to it than that. It's not just a, hey, you're screwed up and there's nothing you can do, right? Rather, I take these as times of, okay, what can I do to increase my feelings of safety and wholeness and belonging and trust in the world? How can I better take care of myself? What can I change about my situation? What's missing? And often, the content of the nightmare or the sleep paralysis can provide clues to that as well. And so that's the starting point, I'd say, is to start centering, is think of this as an invitation to center rest and peace and wholeness. What can I do?
Yeah, like asking what's causing it, because maybe you know very well what's causing it because you're going through some traumatic circumstances or experience a high level of pain or grief, or it can be anything, right? An accident. But from the kind of to twist it a little bit and start to ask yourself questions. I really loved what you said, about, okay, so how I can maybe find more healing, connection, wholeness, what in my life needs improvement, because I feel that it really reframes the situation and it really gives the power back to you when we just focus on, and it's not to of course disregard the circumstances or the problem, or not to say like, oh, I'm not going to talk about what happened to me, but kind of, from what I understood what you said, it's kind of like focus on here and now and what I can do to improve my situation.
Right. And I think that's the practical, and I would even say the evolutionary perspective to bring to this, is that if this nightmare or this bad dream is bringing up something that needs attention, then what can I do in my waking life that addresses that need? Or what insight is a nightmare bringing that I haven't considered yet? Is there information here? Is there an intuition here that I'm disregarding, or I'm continuously disregarding intuition? Hold on, the cat wants to come in.
Oh, it's all right.
She likes to come in when we're recording. That's her favorite.
Amazing. She's welcomed. I love animals. So what would you say to a person, like, I really like what you said about like trying to find maybe something that we overlooked, but I feel that with dreams in general, not only nightmares, but also positive or neutral dreams, people tend to say, oh, I have this dream because it just happened to me yesterday, so I'm just continue dreaming about it. So someone could say, I have this nightmare, or I have this anxiety dreams because I just had car accident and now I'm dreaming all the time about the car accident. So there's nothing to do because I'm just dreaming about what happened. But there is something to it, right? Like this is not the end. But I feel that many people just say, I'm just reliving what happened to me. So there's nothing to it besides what happened to me. How would you respond to?
Yeah, well, I think that clinically what happens when we enter into that repetitive traumatic territory is it's very difficult. I think the healing industry has had a lot of difficulty with treating nightmares. There's been some successes, but they don't work for everyone. And the thing is, I think overall that these treatments, and some of your guests from your other programs have really talked about, how desensitization can work, or rescripting imagery can work. They do have some successes, and they're worth trying with. Sorry, the cat is just like, I have to scratch behind her ear. She'll never leave me alone. Yeah, so to have a professional for sure. But there's also a self-help aspect to these as well, and it's not about just avoiding or looking on the sunny side or trying to say transform a nightmare into something good, because that can have sort of the same effect as, for instance, taking a pharmaceutical that can reduce the symptoms for a while, but it doesn't address the root cause. And so what nightmares are asking us to do is to transform our perspective and often ourself. And I find that this is a perspective that comes out of lucid dreaming work as well, which is often conflated with this idea of controlling the dream and transforming the dream. But it's really impactful in lucid dreams is being able to make a different choice, to see something with a different perspective, to say, stand and confront when my usual thing to do is to run away. Right? This is what lucidity does. It gives us a little bit of courage and a wider perspective to make different choices. And I think that this works for the idiopathic nightmare as well. And so sitting with the nightmare at a time that you're feeling safe can, in writing it down, I think Leslie Ellis really spoke about the power of transferring this and making a narrative and a story out of it is a way of providing distance from the dream and to see it in new light, because it feels like a nightmare is often just stacked with emotions. And then we tell a story that's about external events, and often the feelings and the events, they don't even match, right? And so how can we sit with the feelings and the imagery and begin to disentangle them? And essentially, it's about mindfulness, and it's about self-compassion and developing our ability to sit with ourselves. And it becomes sort of like a muscle that becomes stronger over time. And this is advice that really works for anyone. I'm reminded of, there's a Zen saying to sit in nature for 20 minutes a day, unless you're busy, in which case sit for an hour. And so the same logic is at work here with nightmares. There's I think at first this revulsion to, I don't ever want to think about that again, and I certainly can't explain it to my partner, to realizing, oh, this needs to be honored. How can I find a way to honor this? Which could be writing it down or sharing it in a safe and trusted way with a friend who's a good listener. And that's really important, right? Like someone who knows how to listen and can sit and not try to fix, but just be with. Those skills are, I say, foundational to working with these kinds of experiences.
Yeah, as we said at the beginning, the ability to look straight into something that scares us, that we don't want to look at, that it all starts there. And I also believe that we also need to let ourselves, for this experience, for this process to happen in the right time. Sometimes I feel that maybe it's just a little bit too much. We going through a lot of things and we have nightmares, and maybe the ability to process it's limited, but we can always, I don't know, try to write it down or even share it with someone, as you said, without the necessity of analyzing or interpreting or looking for stuff, because it's already first step, and sometimes one of the most healing steps, because I don't know, from my experience, it's like you getting it off your chest. And as you said, if you have a loving, kind, listening ear in front of you, this already is doing something that's hard to explain by our logical mind, but it is something very powerful. That's why I also advocate for dream sharing, dream community, dream circles. Again, not necessarily always to find the message, the meaning, many times just for holding the space for others to share this experience and know they're not alone, and know that there is place for that in the world.
Yeah. I love that. And part of that, right, is the reality that the cosmos is a mystery, and that there are things that are bigger than us and things we don't know. And to be able to develop an ability to sit in unknowing, especially with others, I think is really profound. I talked about how centering rest is so important, but it's not just about resting the body. And Sandra Dalton Smith talks about this in her work, Sacred Rest. I really love her work in the fact that she breaks down, well, what about emotional rest? And emotional rest is about, what is a place? It's not a rest from emotions. That's not what it is. It's actually a space to feel free to be authentic, to express myself without fear of reproachment. That is emotional rest, right? When we're not masking, right? When we go out in the world in various degrees and smiling and everything is okay. That's masking. You come home, the mask falls. Who can be with me when the mask falls, right? It's a profound question. And that's what dream sharing does. I mean, that's just it. Like, it centers that creative, safe space where I'm going to explain something that actually experienced to me, and it's really weird. Are you in? And everyone's like, yeah.
Yeah, bring it on. Right. That's why I love dream sharing, dream circles so much, because of that. And what about sleep paralysis? Because you mentioned before that there is something we can do when we are in it. From your experience, what would you recommend to someone that it's waking up in the state? I mean, not waking up, it's in the state of sleep paralysis. What are some steps, some things that the person could do?
Yeah, it's so the thing to know is number one, to recognize that this is sleep paralysis. And so that sort of formal lucidity has to emerge, which is easy enough for most people once they hear about what sleep paralysis is and the symptoms of it. These feelings of, can't move, all these things, plus the feelings. That for some people is enough to calm down. But some people also have religious paradigms that aren't quelled by, say, a biological paradigm. And so it kind of depends on, the person of, well, what is an affirmation that I can say that calms me down? Like, this is sleep paralysis, which is a biological event, and I know that my spirit can't be harmed, right? Depending on your belief system. I'm actually safe here. This is my dream. This is a dream. That can bring the fear down. And what's an easy way to do so is to notice that you can control your breath still. And so if you try to breathe in a normal fashion in sleep paralysis, you'll find that you can.
You can.
It's when you're trying to gasp for air where you run into the problems with the diaphragm. But a normal sort of shallow REM style of breath, you can breathe normally. And when people realize that they can control their breath, they realize they can control their fear. And so that's just a nice bodily way of focusing in, okay, I can breathe, I'm safe. Maybe this logical piece, maybe this, this anchoring piece with my faith. And then the question becomes, okay, do I want to wake up? For most people, that's a yes, I want to wake up before anything else happens. And so what the best way is to try to move your extremities. And so fingers, toes, and moving your face, like, scrunching your face up and making faces can break the paralysis for the entire body. But particularly toes and fingers. And so if you just try moving your finger, it'll break and you'll be awake. And so from there, what I recommend for folks to do is to sort of shake it off and not try to go right back to sleep, because you might slip back into it. And so maybe wash your face, run some cold water over your face, maybe write the dream down, listen to some music or progressive muscle relaxation, and then go back to sleep. And then usually people at that point can transition back and be able to get some sleep. The folks who suffer with repetitive sleep paralysis, they end up staying up all night because it was too scary, and they don't, right? And so if you don't do these things, you just end up in the fear place. And then you disrupt your sleep even more. And then the next night, guess what? More sleep paralysis. So it's a vicious cycle. And the way to do it is to find what works for you to have a relaxation, response. And then move through it. Now, the other piece I can say just really briefly is that sleep paralysis is also a portal into other kinds of dreams, such as lucid dreams, or experiences such as out-of-body experience, the feeling of moving out of body or moving into other kinds of realms. And it happens very naturally in sleep paralysis because of the way that the phenomenal self is separated from the physicality of the body. And you notice that separation and that distinction, how the self has been cleaved in some way or another. And so that can create some really interesting experiences. And so I often will use sleep paralysis to go into a lucid dream. And so for me, for example, typically I will notice the feelings of pressure and I'll push or I'll pull in the direction I'm being pushed. And so if I'm getting pushed, I'll go in that same direction.
Okay.
And my phenomenal body will merge into the bed and I'll sink into a vast space. And so now I'm in a dream world. I'm in a different, I'm no longer sensing my body, and I've really moved completely into a phenomenal dream. And so from there, one can have an intention, or one can go with the flow, or meditate, or pray, focus on healing or wellness. Really, you can bring these kind of these helpful intentions into your dream at that point. And so there's a lot that can be said for that. That's why sleep paralysis, I call it a double-edged sword, because it's sort of the curse of the thin boundaried person, so we're more affected by things in the world, so more likely to be hurt, but also to feel sensitive other things as well, right? And so there's all this creative artistic power that comes out of this vulnerability. And over time, everyone who experiences sleep paralysis nightmares, if you can experience that, you can experience the flip side of that. And it just takes time to develop trust with the unknown and to really find, a way of, to be able to sit in that space.
Wow, Ryan, that's so beautiful. And I think everyone really needs to remember that, because I feel that actually many things in life are the two sides of it, right? Like things are not really black and white very often. And this opportunity, this portal, I would say, of sleep paralysis, like if anyone experiencing it would be feeling, maybe they feel that they just want to wake up and end it. But if someone is feeling like maybe there is something else they could experience, and it's like a gate, like a portal, like you said, for lucid dream or out of body experience. So again, there is this, transforming something, a bad in quote experience, into maybe something extremely powerful and beautiful, and you can take it to many places. And maybe also with the nightmares, like regular nightmares, I feel that many times it's also opportunity for becoming lucid, because I heard it from many people and happened to me a couple of times that when we are, during the nightmare and something crazy is happening, but if we program ourselves, if we set intention, if this already happens a few times, so many times there is opportunity actually to become lucid, maybe for the first time, right? Because you say, oh, no, this is not happening. It's a dream. And it's a portal, like a nightmare can be a portal, again, for lucidity, for other experiences. But we need to, of course, be willing to maybe, face the monster, or maybe like really program ourselves to say, okay, I'm gonna become lucid, because it already happened so many times. So again, it's I think that our conversation is all around it, about this ability to look beyond maybe certain beliefs that some things are just really bad or really good, like that the things are fluid, that from something hard something beautiful can come, from a nightmare, lucidity, healing from the sleep paralysis, other like consciousness experiences. It's many times I feel that by just expanding or changing our beliefs or opening our mind, there's so much to be discovered.
Yeah, there's so much. And it's important to also not whitewash our negative experiences as, oh, this is an opportunity for beauty, and that's all that it is. Because again, like there's this whole side to reality. In an existential moment is authentic, and it has its own beauty to it because it's real, it exists, it's communicating something informationally that can help us. And so I always say to folks, don't be too hasty to transform your nightmares. See if you can transform yourself, first. And then what happens is that the nightmare will transform. It will transform in its own accord, according to its own special mercurial way. But when we force feed it, it doesn't work. You throw a Band-Aid on it and say, okay, I'm going to change this monster into my loving grandmother. Well, you just entered a Germanic myth. That's not actually healing. That's Hansel and Gretel. It doesn't end up well, right? So we've got to just take some time. It's slow work, I say. And yeah, for me, what I work on with my own relationship to these things is my ability to stay in it, to stay with it, and to be safe. And if I'm unsafe, I definitely abort the mission. It's a dreamer's choice type situation here, really. How, and it comes down to some very fundamental truths about suffering that we see in so many of the world's mystical traditions, about the importance of acknowledging suffering. And from there, we live, right? But we can't skip it.
Yeah.
And so that's hard. I mean, that's the hard part of the work.
I couldn't agree more. And you said it's just on point. It's not about trying to desperately changing everything if to something else, but just being open that it may lead somewhere else, and not, like I said, like we try to skip the bad and go toward the good, and what is unpleasant we don't want to, our conversation started with that, like we don't like to talk about nightmares because it's scary and we don't want to reinforce it, but that's the path, that's the steps that we kind of need to take. And it's very important to live also those experiences and not to jump into something else, as you said, because for me, when something terrible happens, like something I'm currently experiencing, very hard reality, it's very, very bad. And, it would be very easy to just like look for the good things in it. But there is the step before, as you said, to actually live and acknowledge this experience and go through all the steps.
Yeah.
But then maybe something else can be born out of it.
Yeah, I was reminded of the Disney movie Encanto, which really expresses this so well in the whole, we don't talk about Bruno. I don't know if this, is culturally relevant to you, but it's a good one for children. I'd say, older children, like 8 and above, because when they accept, the hidden dark side to the family, the family is healed. And it's not until there's that integration that healing is possible. And that involved acknowledgement, and that involves a coming back and facing what Bruno has to say. Even though they don't want to hear it, that's when the healing begins. And so it's honestly my favorite Disney movie. It's the best.
Yeah. So maybe just before we wrap up, I would love to ask you about, in our conversations before, you mentioned that there are certain things that we can do to prevent to have those experiences, the nightmares, the sleep paralysis, like a diet. Would you mind to talk a little bit about it? I mean,
Yeah,
obviously,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, like, obviously, we understand already the notion of that when we are whole and when we feel, that we are in a good place in our life, those experiences happen less. But there are also other stuff that other ways that we can take care of ourselves.
Right. And so bad dreams and nightmares can actually be health warning dreams too, about things that we can fix. An example that is true for my life is that I will have a nightmare of my teeth falling out. It's very typical nightmare. And it's terrible. In the dream, I don't know I'm dreaming generally, and I'm trying to fix it, and it's just a goopy mess, and I'm embarrassed. There's social anxiety as well as just like the horror, because teeth are so, right? They're so important. They're so central to good health. And what I found is that I have this dream when I start grinding my teeth in my sleep too much. And the dream happens as I'm actually grinding my teeth. Now, I grind my teeth at times because of anxiety, but why? And the why for me is often because my coffee habit has increased too much again, and I'm drinking too much caffeine, and the caffeine makes me anxious, and then I'm grinding my teeth, and then I'm having the teeth falling out dream, and there it is from start to finish. And so now I've worked out the proof. It took a long time to work it out. Now when I have the dream, I'm like, oh yeah. And then I check, am I drinking too much coffee? Yes. And so I de-escalate. I go back to green tea. I go back and I cleanse myself, and it goes away. Because so that's just one way that our diet and things that we can easily fix in our life can affect specific kinds of nightmares. But there's also ones that are there's open-ended ways to go about it too. Just like watch how food shows up in your dreams, right?
That's so true.
It's a big deal. There, the references to food and indigestion causing nightmares is actually quite old too. I think there's a line in Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment where the main character, Raskolnikov, has a nightmare and someone, I think it's like his landlady or something, I can't remember, said, oh, it's probably just a bit of undigested potato. Right? And so this is just like the explanation for your bad dream. And so it hits a chord, and it has for quite some time. The dream researcher Ernest Hartman used to call it the pepperoni pizza effect, right? So if you have really oily food before bed and that's harmful to digestion, it probably affects your sleep. And it might encourage bad dreams.
Yes, I really agree with that. And at the same note, it's like it's an encouragement to just be really aware of what you do, what you eat. Like this is this beautiful, can be a beautiful reminder of like, let's look into, yeah, into ourselves, into how we live our life. And maybe you can find your own dependencies, right? For everyone it can be something else, even though we would definitely agree that, you know, intake of caffeine and heavy foods before you go to sleep, or not enough sleep, or the more common things, they are pretty well researched and obvious by now. But you may have your own dependencies that if you decide to play a little bit of a detective and say, okay, I'm having this dream, like what changed in my life right now? Did I change something? Did something, you know, not only from the emotional, but as you say, as maybe a physical movement, sport, diet, maybe I moved houses and something is in the air. Like it can be a lot of things, but it's just very interesting to use dreams, not only nightmares, but in general, also dreams as this inspiration for looking into our waking life and see how it, you know, correlates.
I love that, the way you said that, and just the curiosity that comes with that kind of investigation. That's 90% of it. Like just becoming curious, like, why is this happening? And what could this be about? That curiosity causes distance from the emotion. It allows, you know, analytics to come in, and it really begins to do that decoupling process that we were talking about. Curiosity is a great fear killer. There's a story of a woman who related to me her sleep paralysis nightmare, where she'd have the same entity coming. It's a vampire type figure. And then she's a clothing designer. And one day, this night, you know, the vampire is hovering over her and being evil and scary. And she suddenly becomes really interested in, what is he wearing? Like, what is he actually wearing? And so she becomes just sort of hyper focused on like the hem of this blouse, you know, and she's like, what's going on? This is really interesting stitching. And so the nightmare dissolved because she began to hyper focus, for one thing, but two, because she moved into this curiosity space and out of the fear, and it ran its course. And then she took it a step further, and she had multiple dreams like this, where she began investigating the clothing of the ghouls that were haunting her. And then she designed a whole set of clothing based on it and took it to, yeah.
This is an incredible story.
Yeah. And so she had an entire show. This was in South Africa, where they went down and you know, were wearing all this clothes that was inspired by her nightmares. And it was all very, very eerie and just amazing at the same time. And so she just took that fear, and it transformed her experience of creativity and work, and it worked together. And that's the other side. That's the flip side to nightmares. And this vulnerability piece, again, is fresh ideas and something that's a little on the edge, a little outside of our normal reality. And so nightmares expand our worldview.
Yes, and as you mentioned, and someone else that I spoke a few weeks ago about that actually nightmares can be an incredible source of creativity if you let it be it. Like you said about, you know, the stories that we can build around it, or the writing, like someone designed, it's incredible. Like someone made it to design a collection, cloth collection based on their sleep paralysis. Like it's, again, this seeing this opening for something again, not to skip what is happening, but maybe there is something there, that something
Well,
very
and I
interesting.
think that this is the larger piece of it, is that it's not just my nightmare, it's ours. And so when we move it into the world and it becomes collective and we share it, we might not see it. We might not see the truth or the power in this image or in this information, but those around us can be captured by it. And it can, in fact, this is why, honestly, in times of stress and eco-social pressure, times of trauma, times of culture clash, colonization, historically, these are times when religious figures have visions. They have big dreams and they say, I had a dream last night, and in my dream, our people were able to find a way through, right? And so, like, we see this in Native American culture, we see this in historical context, it's all over the world, Mayan context, that there's something about how the dream, including the nightmare, which can be an apocalyptic vision, right, and a collective nightmare, is inspiring to folks, and it helps them organize. It helps them change their reality. It helps them find strength and power and solidarity together. And so this is a whole element, I think, of nightmares that we need to keep in mind, is that they shift culture, they shift worlds, they move nations.
So powerful. I couldn't say that any better. And about the collective aspect of dreaming, I think we could have another conversation for another few hours. But yeah, I would love to end it with this notion of the collective and the importance and how it can shift, as you said, nations. It's so true. So would you like to share with our listeners where they can find more information about your books, about what you do, the courses you offer, the community you are building right now?
Yeah, thank you. So my home on the internet is dreamstudies.org, and you can find the courses that I have available, as well as I have a membership community that I'm building. And it's only open sometimes, but you can sign up for the waiting list if you'd like to join it. But my links to my books, as well as my dream amulets, are there as well. And so, and all of the free articles that I've been blogging about since 2007 on this website are there. And so I recently changed the way that you can search on the site. So it's a much better search function now, that you can really find what you're looking for using the search. And so I'm really thankful that that search is getting better these days. So that's it. Dream
Yeah.
Studies.
Amazing. I'm going to add the link to the show notes so everyone can find your website and the way to contact you. Yeah, and I really encourage everyone to sign up to Ryan newsletter, because he's always sharing a lot of interesting stuff that are going on in the dream world. I really personally love this newsletter because he doesn't share only stuff that he does, but also what is happening out there in the dream world. So a lot of great stuff. So just check it out. And thank you so much, Ryan, for being here today, for sharing this information, this knowledge, because as I said, I feel it's so important nowadays for everyone who is struggling and suffering from nightmares and sleep paralysis and so on.
Thank you. It was really wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you so much.